Igor Tudor has left Spurs with them on the brink of relegation, and after only 7 games in charge already, all pointers lead to Roberto De Zerbi being appointed the new Spurs boss. It looks like it may be done in the next couple of days. So today we're going to go through very simply the pros and cons of De Zerbi and debate whether he is the man that can save Spurs from relegation. Let's get straight into it. Reese, give us your thoughts on De Zerbi. It looks as though, as we said, he is the main leading number one contender at the moment. What are your initial thoughts on De Zerbi at Spurs?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's coming so late into the season. Everyone thought that De Zerbi was probably going to wait until the summer, but it looks like the board have acted to bring him in now. And I suppose that includes probably a relegation clause in some capacity, if or a bonus in some capacity if they do make it now. I think this is a sensible move for Spurs. It's sensible for clubs that have a top four aspiration in general, despite Spurs being in the bottom four, if that makes sense. So I think they've acted quickly because it looks like United are quite keen as well. So they've had to go for this move and they've probably had to pay a little bit more than they were probably expecting to bring him in. But it makes perfect sense. Look, I still don't believe Spurs were really going to go down. And I thought Tudor would still have enough to get them out. But they've gone for that approach of that organised, structured style and it didn't work. So they've gone for someone with a bit more, as we know, flair. Someone who's very, driven. He had success at Brighton. He wasn't afraid to take it to teams. Someone who is probably what they need right now, then, in this case. A manager who's going to give them that little bit more of an edge, give them a little bit of flamboyancy. They've got players there that have that skill, they have that technique. Okay, we're going to see a 4-2-3-1 or a 3-4-3. I think that will help people like Vicario, gain his confidence back a little bit. So I think this is a smart appointment from Spurs because I think they needed maybe the manager with the charisma and the personality that maybe the other two didn't have. It echoes a lot to me, maybe Pochettino vibes from 2013-14 when they brought him in for the 14-15 season. That manager of achieved well with the squad, built that nice, easy, tidy squad, and then was able to take it to the next level. This is what De Zerbi should do. We'll get onto his achievements and his, you know, length at clubs in a minute. But this should really be where we see De Zerbi prove he's the coach that a lot of people are hoping he's going to be.
Yeah, 100%. It feels like a top level appointment. So, but I guess the question is, and we'll get into it, is why now? With Tudor, it was a very clear short term appointment. He's got a good record on the continent, getting short term gains out of teams. So why are they now flipping to, oh, we're going to go for a long term appointment, but we're on the brink of relegation? So it's a little bit confusing, I think, the message. Jamie, what are your kind of initial thoughts on De Zerbi coming into Spurs?
It's a tough one, really, because I think if this could really work out, I think this could actually be like their best appointment since Poch. It's someone I think he can bring a style of football that Spurs fans will enjoy watching as well, and that helps with the Spurs way. Spurs fans will sort of under Redknapp, they weren't going for titles, they weren't doing as well as what they Poch, but they enjoyed watching the games, and I think that's what they've lacked for quite a while. So I think if De Zerbi can get them playing in a sort of favourable way, maybe not winning, not being as successful coming in the sort of top fours and things for the short term at least, Spurs fans will still be sort of happy with a progress. So actually, I think it could really work out favourably. But at this moment in time, they go. Let's say they go and lose the next 2, 3 games. Let's say he gets appointed this week. It's a very toxic place, and De Zerbi has been known to sort of blow up. He's fallen out with several owners in the past. It's so it also could be like the worst, where it just completely goes bang at the end of the season.
Could it be less than 7 games? I guess that's a quick question to ask. Could it be
No,
less than Tudor somehow?
no, unless they both agree to go away without spending any money. I don't think Spurs will go, we're going to sack you and pay you whatever the money is. So I think he will survive the whole season, even if he loses all of them, because they might as well, because it'll save him a bit of money. There will be a release, sort of a relegation clause in there for that will probably suit both of them. So I do think it will be to the end of the season. If there's another manager in that, I'd be very shocked. It would be quite shocking to have that many managers in a single season. But I do think it is a good appointment, and I wasn't too keen on when seeing sort of Tudor coming in because short-term plans work if you have a manager that knows the league, knows sort of what to do. If they went right, we're actually signing Sam Allardyce, maybe not exactly him, but someone like him, I would have gone, yeah, that's a great short-term signing. With Tudor, I know this is hindsight, but I thought this more at the time as well. It's sort of like he doesn't actually know the league. Why do you think he's definitely got the capabilities of keeping you up? And it was sort of a bit of a risk, I felt. Whereas De Zerbi knows the league, and I thought he did a really good job for Brighton. He got them much more stable. They are now a stable Premier League club and nowhere near the relegation battle. And that, I think, large parts was down to him. Obviously, the whole sort of, the club and everything. So I think it's a good appointment from Spurs. I think this is the one they probably should have done sooner. But I think they did realise they messed up. As simple as that. I know he's leaving, I think, by mutual consent due to sort of some other sort of reasons. But I do think this is a much, much better appointment than a Tudor short-term appointment with it.
Yeah, I look at this and I think they needed that, like I said, that flair and flamboyancy, you know, that they need now. It's no doubt that when he came into Brighton, he was very influential. However, you'd argue that once his tactics got found out, they were pretty easy to play against. But I think De Zerbi's strength here is exactly what Spurs need for now. He's very good at using opposition pressure to his advantage in his style of play, which is why I think he surprised a lot of people at Brighton for a while. So in the current situation Spurs are in, where they can't sign any players obviously until the summer, he'll be able to make the most of that with that style, catching those teams out. However, when Spurs, because they have ambition, they're going to want to grow in the summer. Are his tactics and approach going to be where they want them to be? But for now, that doesn't really matter because, like I said, they need to get out of a different situation, which they're more than capable of doing. So this will probably work quite nicely, for what they need. Like I said, right now, yes, we know he's a bit of a character. And a lot of people could argue that his appointment at Marseille was a disappointment because they thought he was going to go on to a bigger club. People forget that Marseille are a big club. They're the most supported club in France. They're, Champions League winners, for goodness sake. So it's going to be interesting for him because I think this Spurs job, like I said, it reflects that Pochettino vibe. I think this is a real opportunity for him to get the best out of these players because I'm sorry, but there are players there, good players, and I do expect them to play better, which I'm sure they will under this coach. So they had to make the appointment, and they had to make the appointment now, whether they liked it or not, because I think the performance at home to Forest was so poor. There was alarm bells were definitely ringing because that should have been the game that changed things around for them. But they've made the change now, which is not a good sign for the other clubs around them because they were hoping that it would continue, and I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I think my initial thoughts on this kind of similar, but it's a good appointment, but I don't think it's the right time. This is an appointment if they stay up to go right. Look, we've had a bit of a shit time. We are going to we're going to look to the future. We're going to try and get out of it. We're going to try and improve and be the big club that we think we should be. Him coming in now on the brink of relegation, I don't think is a good fit for anyone. I don't think it's good for the players. I don't think it's good for De Zerbi. I don't think it's great because it is literally, it's not about, oh, I'm going to implement my style of football. It's not about, this is my vision, this is my philosophy. It is literally about coming in and going, scrap everything you know. We just need wins. And I don't think, I really don't think that is a good way to start a long-term managerial appointment with someone like De Zerbi, who has a very clear style of football, quite an attractive style of football, I think most people would say. And he's coming in with his back against the wall from minute one, knowing that if he loses the first game, everyone's going to be on his back going, no, we should have gone in for Redknapp or Keane or a Spurs player or Ryan Mason or someone who gets to the club. He's then going to go in interviews and be arrogant because that's who he is. And I honestly think this could become a disaster appointment, even though it's the right guy. Because let's say he comes in. Let's say he comes in and they get relegated. Then what? Spurs fans are going to say you're a disgrace. You got us relegated, even though it's a few games. De Zerbi's going to be like the club's a bunch of bottle jobs. I think he'll then leave. I don't see De Zerbi managing Spurs in the Championship. So I love the appointment if they stay up, but I hate the appointment right now. I just it doesn't.
Well,
I don't know. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't feel right.
it's the fact that they've obviously had to make it now. Like Tudor obviously wasn't working, so where do they go? Ryan Mason didn't sit the world alight at West Brom. I like Ryan Mason, but is he in a position now with Spurs in the relegation fight to be taking them on? Probably not. Why would Robbie Keane leave Ferencvaros, where he could win the league again and qualify for Europe, you know, leave that now? He might as well finish that job off. And then, Harry Redknapp, unfortunately, is a thing of the past. If they say that players don't listen to older players these days, why the hell are they going to listen to him? So they need something. They need something now. And I've been critical of De Zerbi over the years because I don't think he's this elite manager that people think he is. That's nothing personal, but I think he offers something that Spurs are lacking. I think he's going to make this team entertaining in these final few games. We could say that they need to defend, but the reality is they're not defending and they're not scoring goals. His record, managerial record overall with a 42%, 42.98% win record isn't nothing to be, wow, that's outstanding. His games are pretty much as followed. He won 39 with Marseille, but he lost 20, in 69 games. That's a lot to me for Marseille in that level. Brighton, 89 played, won 38, lost 29. So you can see there's a gun-ho approach here. It's all or nothing. And the reality is at the moment, they're not winning. So I'm not going to be shocked if they're going to have to start up in the ante with the players they have who are capable, win the 3-2s, do the 4-3s, because they're not even winning the 1-0s at the moment, which is what I thought Tudor was going to be brought in for to do. So I think it makes sense for now. And you'll probably find that if they were to go down, which again they're not going to, there'd be a relegation break where he can go or something like that. So, the Spurs board aren't stupid. They know how to run business. So I think
On
I
that
think
note,
that got pressured into doing it now because maybe they were going to go for other alternatives.
but this is a little bit more generally in terms of the current situation that Spurs are in. But you say the board know how to do business, and that's true. But do they know football? I think this is a big debate, not just with Spurs, but with other clubs at the minute, where you've got to look at a bit of a bigger picture. Like, why are Spurs in this position? A lot of pressure. I know we're not going to debate it in full detail today, but it is about the board. They understand business, but they don't understand football. And I think that's part of the reason they're in this situation where there's no strategy, it feels like. They've gone from a short term appointment to keep us up. Now they're going to a long term appointment. Either way, like as I said, De Zerbi, I think, can be a good coach. I mean, let's talk about some of his strengths. Pretty attractive style of football. You can definitely say he overachieved at Brighton with a maybe an average squad. Some people might not like that, but I'd argue he overachieved. I'm pretty sure he gave them their highest ever position in the league, right? So clearly a capable manager at getting the best out of players. I think that's his biggest advantage. And he likes to try and play an attractive style of football like an elite coach. Jury's out on whether he's there yet. That would probably be the biggest pro I'd give him at the moment. Is there anything else from you guys' side that you're seeing that you like about him and you say, look, I actually really back him because of that reason?
Well, I think it's to do with the attacking sense. He will be a better attacking coach because, unfortunately, Spurs are leaking goals. And people said these players are good players. Your Romeros, your Van der Vens, Spence, and Porro. Like, if you actually look at that on paper, it's not a bad defence. But they make a mistake every single game. Well, I'd say even more than every single game. So really, you can't rely on the defence. They can't do what I'd say a West Ham and a Forest can do in actually we're sitting 10 men behind the ball and defend well because I'd say they're less likely to make a mistake than the Tottenham back four. And then if it's not that, it's the keeper. Because I think Vicario's going to be out for the rest of the season. for a surgery, so it's going to be Kinski. And now we know what's happened. We saw what happened with him in Madrid. So you've got to rely. You can't rely on this defence. So really, you've got to go in a more attacking way. And the games that Spurs have, having sort of Sunderland, Wolves, Leeds, Everton, you can't you have to attack. You have to try and get goals in this team, and I think they've been lacking them really. Like apart from probably the Atletico games, they're not scoring many goals. And I think having a better manager in the attacking sense will really help them. Because once again, I don't think they've got terrible players. So like when we did the relegation video, we all sort of said, you know what, they've actually got good players, but they're not doing well at all. So I think if you get them set up correctly, put them on the front foot, they will get the goals that keeps them up. And that's what I think De Zerbi will bring. And just on your point about the long termness, you have to start now. You can't just go, you know what, we'll wait 8 games, bring in, I don't know who else you're going to bring in, because you had to make a managerial change because it wasn't working. So I think you have to go, yes, we need someone new, and let's just go for this is going to improve Tottenham fully. It's yes over the next 7, 8 games or how many games there are left, and then for the rest of the sort of season we'll back him in the summer. So I think you need to do it all at the same time. You can't just keep going. We'll do it for 5 games here, 5 games there. It won't work like that, and they'll go down. If they kept Tudor, I think they would have gone down after seeing the Forest performance.
Yeah, my pro for me is pretty much building on what Jamie said and what I said earlier that he's going to use the opposition pressure to his advantage. Teams like Leeds, etc., are going to press, so he's going to be able to capitalize on that. They're the games that Spurs are going to win, I'm sure. So that's going to really work to their advantage. He's going to give them a bit of flair that they need. I think a lot of players will react well to De Zerbi's managerial approach and style. I know that we saw some videos before, particularly at Marseille, where he asked the guy to leave the training pitch, for example. But Marseille's a different animal and a different club. Spurs are not a combustible club like Marseille. No disrespect to Marseille, but we know they're pretty chaotic in French football. I don't think Spurs are like that at all. They're quite a calm, level-headed club, regardless of their situation. So he's going to have those players that are going to respond well and players that are going to like him. I think Pedro Porro is going to benefit massively probably from playing under De Zerbi. He's already done quite well anyway, but I think he's got there. Van de Ven should improve. I know I mentioned Vakara should have a confidence boost, but yes, he's an example. He's out. Kimski should do just fine, but even then, that's what they're going to press for. Solanke should benefit from this. Kolo Muani, so it should be a good style that they need right now. It's that little bit of a charging of the battery. Battery's been a bit flat. Let it charge and then it'll work on full power. And then, of course, long term. Look, De Zerbi is not a long term appointment for Spurs, in my opinion. Okay, he hasn't been. I think he's only ever stayed at a club longest for what 2 seasons. Brighton might have been his longest club. So I don't see it long term, but we don't know. It depends how well Spurs do and how well he's backed. They will back him. He doesn't need to sign superstar players. So it all depends how it goes. But for now, he's exactly what they need. A kick up the backside, a firework, get on with it. You don't have any distractions. You don't have the Champions League. We're playing once a week. Just go for it. That's our style. And a lot of those games are so winnable. I maintain they'll finish out, they'll finish just fine.
Well, look, Reece, you said fireworks, so let's flip to the negative side because as much as he's been lauded for his style of football, possession-based, attacking, etc., there's one obvious con of his style and approach and his attitude, and that is the absolute ability to, as you said, essentially blow up and essentially fall out with the board. Um, and he's look, the Marseille scenario obviously didn't go very well. Ultimately left after pretty much a season due to pretty much internal disagreements about the strategy, the signings, the board. So he's got a history of basically falling out with owners, which in recent times it seems to be the modern style of managerial approach these days. But that none of that ends well. We've seen it so many times already this season. It does not end well. So as much as we're saying it's a good long-term appointment, For me, this feels like an inevitable. He'll be here for 12 months or less now. I'm thinking about it in real time because Spurs are not a club. You say they're going to back him. What does backing him look like? They're not going to pay more wages than they're paying currently. In terms of wage versus their income, they're one of the lowest clubs in the league. So I don't think they're going to break that wage structure for De Zerbi. So are we not then in a scenario where he's joining at the most toxic time? If he loses a couple of games, everyone's going to be against him from minute one, which is, I think, a bit stupid, but is probably how it'll go. Then he's not going to be backed. Let's say they stay up. He's obviously going to want a load of players. The Spurs going to attract the kind of players he wants. We've all seen the Ange interview, right? Is that suddenly going to change? Is that suddenly going to change because De Zerbi's there? I don't think so. And I personally see it going the same way that all these other appointments are gone. I think there's deeper issues at the club. And I think he's going to fall out with the board very, very quickly, regardless of what happens. And if they get relegated, he'll probably just leave anyway. So that's my con. Have you guys got anything to add to that, or any other negatives?
I think you're a tad harsh on his Marseille sort of part because they are third in the table, and at this moment in time, really, you don't knock PSG off it. I know Lens are doing quite well above them, but you don't knock PSG off the perch. PSG are probably still going to win the league. So it's coming in the top, 2, 3, top 4 sort of. It's actually not a bad result. So I think he's actually done quite well there. But yes, he is going to have arguments with people because he wants it done his way. He wants full sort of control. And I think the way that they're going to bring him in is they've got to promise him certain things. Because not long ago, he was linked with like the Bayern Munich job. He was linked with, if Pep goes, maybe City go for De Zerbi. So people rate him very highly. So for Spurs in the position they're in, where they're in the relegation battle, for him to sign, they're going to have to go, if you keep us up, we will give you X, Y, Z. Now, that won't be a specific player. That might be a set of money. That might be, we have this in place. Are you happy with that? And he's got to go yes or no. If he does do it, that means he is happy with what he's going to be given, because I don't think he's going to go in and go, let's sign the contract now and I'll decide in the summer. It just won't work like that. They need to have a bit of forward planning. Otherwise, I just don't think it would work out with any manager, let alone him. And a con is, look, even his Brighton teams did get sort of battered a few times. So with the mistakes that I sort of mentioned earlier, with the sort of, you're seeing the Van der Vens, Kinski, Romero, other sort of players, Spurs could take an absolute battering. Like, they've got Chelsea in their final sort of fixtures, which is a game that they are terrible at. I think it was sort of like they've not won in 20 or something stupid like that at Stamford Bridge. So it's kind of, in that game, it could get very bad. Chelsea could absolutely run riot, but you've kind of got to go, okay, we'll lose 3 points there, get battered in whatever, as long as we beat Leeds, as long as we beat Wolves, I don't care. That's what Spurs fans have got to understand, especially given the sort of short time he's got at the club before the summer. You've kind of got to go, we've got to accept it. And because of the way it is sort of fairly toxic at Tottenham about the whole possibly going relegated, and I don't blame Tottenham fans for it. That's what could sort of like people not liking him very quickly. Like you sort of said, they could turn quite quickly, like you said, George. I think it could be, but I think they've got to understand, if they win the important games, which I think are Leeds, Wolves, probably, well, Sunderland is a big game, and then Brighton at home as well. I think the next 5 games Spurs have got, I need them to win 3 of them. Like, if I'm coming in and I'm being De Zerbi, so I need to win 3 of them because they are winnable games. But if he doesn't, that's where the problem is. But he might play Aston Villa when they play Villa, and they might give him a good hiding. I know Villa haven't been as on form, but at Villa Park, they're a very good team. And it's like, you've got to understand that you go, okay, we got beat here for, let's say, like 3-4-1, but we got Leeds next. Let's go and beat them. And that will matter more than say, we lost 1-0 at Villa. and then you go and get a draw against Leeds. Pointless. If you've got to win one, lose
Yeah.
one, fine. You've just got to accept the position they're in. Next season, certain things like that won't be acceptable. But this at this point, they've got to accept winning the important games matters more than maybe one humiliating loss.
I think weirdly he might be better in the big games though. I know that goes against what you're saying because I don't disagree, but from memory I thought he did quite like he's quite a good tactical coach. So I almost feel like weirdly there's an argument that he might actually do better in the bigger games. Not that it matters, obviously, as you said, for points wise, you need to beat the small teams, right? But I think it would be quite interesting now to see how he fares in those games. Um, Reese, any more to add to that?
Not particularly. Like I said, is he'll win the games that he needs to win. I don't. I think he's more than capable of going to Sunderland and getting a result. I think he's more than capable of going to Villa Park and getting something. I think he'll be long safe by the time they play Chelsea. So I don't see them needing to sweat there. I think they're gonna finish out of it comfortably. I think they'll, like I said, they'll get that kick up the backside they need. We're discussing long term. We don't need to discuss long term yet because this is for the now, and he's exactly what they need now. So it makes sense. They've gone for him now because they probably thought, well, who else is currently available on the market that offers something different? It was him, in comparison to the others lined up. It's, saves him potentially going somewhere else after. But for now, he's who they need. They'll start taking the game to some people and they'll get those results to steer
I
comfortably.
do want to just say, look, you are quite confident. To say they'll be comfortably safe by the Chelsea game. I know these are the more important games are in front. They're the bigger games for Spurs to see if they are going up or down. I can't say you can fully say that you've got to be confident because the way Spurs have been all season. Because the Forest game, I think we all probably thought we'd think Tottenham will win this, and then going losing 3-0 is a massive result. So I wouldn't say I disagree with you saying you're confident, but I do think you could be right. They could be safe, but to say confidently, I think is probably the wrong wording. I'd say on that.
No, I think I'm
Yeah.
comfortable. I'm confident that we'll be comfortable because I think, I said I was positive about Tudor, but I was basing his work off Lazio and Juve, and they're on the other side of the table. De Zerbi's probably coming in here playing into his strengths a little bit, underachieve and underestimate. I've said about Leeds, I think they get up for the wrong games, and I think they're sliding. Forest won this game, but we know capable of Forest of losing the next three. So I
Yeah, but
see that they're in a better position. I think they'll be more consistent. They'll get a couple of wins, a draw. Yeah, they might have a 4-0 defeat in there, but that doesn't matter at the moment because they'll already pick up the points beforehand. And I see it starting at Sunderland where I think they'll get a result.
look, I think it all depends on that on the first game. That honestly I do, and it's so stupid. It's so simple. If they lose that, I think the confidence will remain the same. But Reece, you were confident they would beat Forest, and they got spanked 3-0. Like it doesn't matter who's in charge. Spurs are terrible and have been terrible. They've been underperforming for 2 years. So De Zerbi, as good as he is, he's not a magician. This isn't a Spurs team who are going to go and win the last 6 games because it's De Zerbi. They are not good enough, and that's why they're in the position. De Zerbi is not going to wave his magic wand. They stay up, and suddenly they're challenging for the top four. There are deeper issues at Tottenham Hotspur that are not going to be resolved in the next few months. So, look, Spurs fans can be optimistic about the sign. I think it's a good appointment. I don't think it's going to go as well as people think, though,
If
because he's not a magician.
If Spurs go down, it's not De Zerbi's fault. I think
Yeah,
that's where it's a positive for him for the appointment because really you go look at what happened for most of the season. This isn't actually down to me. I've come in
Yeah.
and tried to turn it round. But yeah, I think that's where he's okay in that. It won't look as bad on him if he gets
It wouldn't
relegated.
it
mm.
wouldn't be his fault, but I will argue this is for years people went for the Allardyces, the Sean Dyches, those firefighter styles. They don't work anymore. They don't work anymore. Sam Allardyce, has now 2 relegations on his CV with West Brom and Leeds. Sean Dyche was seriously in danger of taking Forest down, and I still think he would have taken Burnley down before they let him go. And even Everton was struggling with him. So I don't think that approach works anymore. I think Pereira at Forest, he's got a bit of flair to him. It's starting to pay off a little bit, and they're starting to climb away. I think this is the same approach. They'll start climbing away. it seems to be now that firefighting with a more defense structure is no longer the thing. It's going to have to be, we're just going to have to go for it and show a bit of flair because those players have that. They have that flair, they have that style, and that's the approach, and that's why it's going to work. And I think other clubs might be a little bit nervous around them because they might think, do we have that flair in us at this moment in time when it matters? So remains to be seen, but I still think they'll steer clear.
All right. There you have it. That is all we've got time for. As always, we've had our say. We want to hear from you. Hit us up below. And as always, like, comment, and subscribe. You know the drill.